Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William White, yes, one of the official scientists of the North American Dogman Project. It is always great to see you make your way into the fox den and awaken me as we once again hunt the nefarious Dogman. Much better. Even I do need to replenish lost nutrients sometimes. So, without further ado, it is once again time for William White and Starfox to venture into the darkness with a Midnight Society.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back once again to the Fox Den. I see you have found your way through the fog in the forest, back for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. We will be sitting around the fire, burning the late night timber once again as we read a few chapters from the Midnight Society book with our science team. Ooh, it's always time to nerd out when you bring in the science. So get ready to learn some excellent stuff because William White is once again sitting down with us. How you been, man?
I've been pretty good. Yeah, life's been good.
This is great stuff, my friend. It's always excellent to sit down with the science team. I love all my hosts, but like I said before, if I was given a choice, I mean, I love sharing knowledge too, but if I was given a choice, one or the other, like a ketchup and mustard, I would much rather learn than speak. So it's always great to have people that just come in here and flood the airways with knowledge, man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great
It's always good
stuff.
to be hungry for knowledge.
Yes. I don't like to dive into the past too much in regards of, when you're like, oh, I wish I would have done this more in the past. But back in school, like I said, man, I didn't have the wealth of knowledge I do now, meaning I didn't care too much. I was a jock dude and, 16, 17, 13, whatever, man, just kind of like a little punk. So, yeah, if I could revert back in time, I definitely would have, put my nose to the books a little bit more. But I guess who knows if they were even teaching me relevant stuff. But either way, that's why it's beautiful to always learn. And when I tell people, they're like, no, I'm too old to learn, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's like, dude, you can be learning till the day you no longer exist, man. Just seep it in. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's excellent, dude. So that's why I really do appreciate you. And to the audience tonight, yes, we have already spoken about Werewolf Castle one time. Castle Hauska in the Czech Republic, a very interesting place. And we are going to dive back into this area in just a few. But I was digging up some really great stuff. And when it comes to indigenous lore, the majority of it is oral based. And the reason that is, to anyone out there that doesn't technically understand that, is there have been points in time when it was written down, but no different than any other author of anything. It's from the perspective of the individual that's writing it down. And it was translated more or less in a different way and depicted differently than the oral part that the indigenous cultures were presenting. So that is a big reason why it's not written down. So you have to listen, find people, elders that are willing to speak or have content already out there, which again, I love learning. So let's seep it up. So I was doing a ton of that, but there were people that did document things as well. For example, there was somebody that was shipwrecked who was like 21, and another individual that were basically prisoners of war to this tribe of indigenous people. They were good to them, but they spent 2 years with this culture, and what they documented in their novel aspects and the western side of documenting things nearly is identical to the oral traditions that you do hear, not even from this tribe, because these traditions have been passed down for quite a long time. So yes, from being a prisoner of war, you could eventually take on the beliefs of the people that you are around, and especially if they've been good to you. I mean, what is that called? Stockholm syndrome to an extent, where you,
Yeah, you might call it that. Yeah.
yes, okay, so that could have occurred, and maybe they just started really, believing a lot of the things that were orally passed down to them. But according to one of the people, one of the guys was really cool with integrating in with, the tribe, but the other person really wanted to just go back to being around his civilization and didn't really want anything to do with that. So those two people are telling the same thing, which kind of would put a little bit of a curve in the Stockholm syndrome aspect. But what's really cool is they speak about a dog people. And that's literally what they use for terminology. And they
Hmm.
lived in burrows and caves deep in the forest. And now, some of the other lore that goes with it is that basically, more or less, this woman ended up having some sort of connection. This is a little bit more of the mystical part. And then they end up having, offspring that were supposedly, half human, half, canine, which is really interesting. But the actual facts of it is they all speak of these, whether it was people or these dog creatures that were living in dens and burrows deep in the forest. And they really didn't want much to do with them. So I found that pretty interesting because again, that's just another indigenous culture reference of
Hmm.
something Dogman related. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that before I bring up something else.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty fascinating. Yeah, the whole dogman type creatures living in burrows sounds pretty familiar to some of the theories we've had about caves. You know, so that is interesting. And well, where were these islands? What part of the world?
This was in Canada, all up in
Oh,
remote
this is
parts of
Canada.
Canada. Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's even on the same continent as the rest of the dogman sightings here in North America. So yeah, I think that's there's some credibility to that, perhaps.
Hmm.
Consistency. At least I like consistency.
Yeah, like you said, the consistency aspect. Yes, because you have one person that was like, "Hey, I really like, staying here." The other guy's like, "No, I'm not really about that stuff." But those two are still friends and they're
Yeah.
documenting it. And then you have the oral history that ties in, like I said, way before this tribe that had caught these people for war victims. They were speaking about this already. So it's not like this culture just brought it up. So that I found that to
Hmm.
be interesting. And they had some really cool things they would do too where, for example, these two gentlemen spoke about how they came in and the tribal member's son, basically the father put a revolver up the side of his head, shot to make it look like he unalived him, but he didn't because they were reenacting something. And then all these basically beings like wolves came in on all four, but they were the indigenous culture, but they had done all these elaborate masks and things, and they even mimic the way the wolves are running. They come in and carry him off on his back and stuff. So
Hmm.
it's just really interesting the connection with wolves and indigenous cultures, man, for good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. The the northwestern tribes, over there in like Oregon and Washington, on their totem poles, they would put the wolf head up near the top a lot of times. That the eagle was usually on top, but it was a prominent fixture in their religions. You would figure that it's kind of top to bottom levels of importance, right? So yeah, to have the wolf head up top, kind of implies that it was important in their culture, which, what's a wolf? It's a pack hunter and a scavenger. It's interesting that they would put it up there, unless perhaps they were, um, it wasn't really a wolf they were referencing with that carving on the totem poles, but maybe something else that kind of has the head of a wolf, right?
Yes. And there really does seem to be a clear difference between both of those with the indigenous cultures. They seem very well to know the difference between a wolf and then a skinwalker or something that's not
Yeah.
naturally a wolf. They really seem to understand the depictions. I mean, they're not
Oh yeah,
mixing them
and
up.
no, I don't. I know whatever they carved, they intended to carve. No, but like in the eagle's important to them because the eagle represents like the sky and the sun. That's kind of the realm of the eagle. So that's why it's also at like the top of the totem, right? Because it's the most important. Um, yeah, I mean, what they're carving, or eagle, could be a thunderbird. That's actually one of my favorite cryptids is thunderbird. I don't think it gets talked about enough. But anyway, that to put it up near the top kind of gives it more significance than you would think that it's something that just goes around and chases down deer and elk and scavenges off of others' kills would be in their culture. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yes,
worth
great
thinking
stuff.
about.
Great stuff right there. And actually, we will just get you on here at some point as well. I am doing something every Saturday with one of my friends, Brian Barber. He has a show that he wanted me to come host with him, and it's called
Hmm.
Stories for Bedtime. And what we do is we don't just talk Dogman. I'm actually going out of my way to just talk about a ton of other cool things. And yeah, we actually just spoke about giant spiders on there and the Oklahoma octopus, and I plan on
Oh,
speaking
cool.
about, yeah, World War II weaponry and all this such. So at some point in time, man, we'll get you up on there, dude. We can talk to Thunderbird because, yeah, that is pretty cool stuff, bro.
Yeah, I think they're neat. So.
Yeah, excellent, man. So, all right, dude. Have you ever heard of I'm going to butcher this, unfortunately, Peloponnesian Peninsula?
Hmm.
Okay. And this occurred and is referenced in the eighth volume of the Greek naturalist Historia, Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder, and
Hmm.
also his friend Evanthius. They wrote an encyclopedia. Okay. Like I said, it's the eighth volume of the Greek slash Roman encyclopedia. And in this, they mention the cynocephali without saying it about how there was a group of men and women, okay, that lived in this area, but then they went up to the mountains, deep within the mountains, and went off and supposedly lived with a tribe of dog people. Oh, the cynocephali. So wait a
Yeah,
second.
sure.
You have for 9 years a group of these supposed men and women that were able to transform and shapeshift back and forth. Interesting. And they supposedly lived around that area for 9 years before going up into the mountains and living with the cynocephali. So wait a second. Now you have the Romans who were, I mean, the Greeks seem to be a little bit more chill. Okay. They were pretty screwed up still too, but the Romans didn't really seem to care about too much, man. I mean, but they did have a very deep love affair with Greek history
Oh
and
yeah.
in the Greeks themselves, which a lot of
Yeah,
people
they
don't.
stole a lot of Greek culture and made it their own. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, a lot of people don't realize what they did is told you to the Greeks, hey, you can still have Athens and act like it's Greece, but we own you more or less. And that is interesting that they took the time to again even document things, okay? Because like I told people before, this isn't really a time frame where authors and journalists were looked upon as cool kids, okay? You were kind of like the dweebs and like no one cared about you because you weren't a huge political figure, you weren't a gladiator that mattered like a general in the army, you were pretty much you just wrote things down, okay? So for them to even document it had to have some clout to it. And I just thought that was interesting again because you and I have already spoken about the
Hmm.
cynocephali, and that part right there I was never introduced to until again I was reading and watching and actually was reading some segments from that book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the fact that Greece is where the legend of lycanthropy originated, with King Lycan at the Peloponnesian peninsulas in Greece, right? Um, so yeah, that it all kind of ties together a little bit there. Um, Being the origin of the Wolfman story, and then however many hundreds of years after that, you get this account from Pliny the Elder, who he wrote about a lot of stuff that we view as being very correct and true, for the ancient world. And then he wrote about other things like Atlantis and the cynocephali that most mainstream science has rejected, right? So,
Hmm.
he is credible in the things that, the modern world recognizes, which means maybe he's credible in the things they don't recognize as well.
Yes, that's how I would pretty much perceive it. I mean, you can't really say someone's credible and discredible at the same
Yeah,
time. That's
yeah.
kind of
It's
a
like, well, he's
contradiction.
super honest and a great scholar when he's talking about like the Persian Wars or whatever. But then he likes to go talk about weird mythical creatures, so we
Yeah,
don't believe him
exactly.
there,
It doesn't really seem to add up. And one more thing before we head over to the Czech Republic again. Recently, I saw this beautiful documentary about how these scientists think that just like anything else, nature has a blueprint. And I actually brought this up to Robert Prevo, who's part of our science team, and he doesn't see why this couldn't occur as well. And if you look at how nature functions, whenever something is removed, it recreates something that is very similar to fill the void, okay?
Sure.
So, if you look at certain species of animals, sometimes they have more ancient DNA in them than they are supposed to, meaning a grizzly bear has been unalive before and had a much higher rate of a short-faced cave bear in it than it really
Mm,
should have. Okay. And it's no different than with human beings. Some people have more Neanderthal in them, Denisovian,
right.
etc. But moral of what I was trying to say is it's interesting that if nature has a blueprint, like that every once in a while, man, it's like a reset basically when that species is on its last limb. What if it is recreating something that we thought was extinct because it did create that from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, that, that would that's an interesting thought you've had there because um, nature does tend to fill the voids, the gaps in the animal kingdom after given enough time. Um, so that then makes you wonder: is it just the nature of life on Earth to continue to evolve? And so you will eventually always have some sort of a evolution of a somewhat similar creature into a more similar creature, or is it all part of the programming? Does nature run on some sort of divine code that makes it that where it's actually taking more of a role in directing human evolution or any evolution on the planet than we would normally give it credit for. That's Now you got me thinking. That's pretty cool.
Hey man, you're one of my good buddies and you're a great mind. So anytime I hear some stuff like that and I really sit down and think about it and it actually has a lot of clarity to it where it could fit into some pieces, I try to share that information with
Yeah,
others that can definitely really put some benefit to it. And yeah, at the end of the day, man, people think that nature can be erratic and all that, but there's a rhyme and reason to even chaos, okay? And
sure.
it's functioned quite well without any sort of humans or whatever animals have gone extinct. It seems that, nature has what found a way, more or less like what they say in Jurassic
Yeah,
Park, not to be
right.
corny.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
yes, it's just super awesome. And again, just knowledge, man. And it's just food for thought for people out there that are not, so sure about things. I mean, we do have these animals that existed at points in times and some like 10,000, 11,000 years ago. These are just blinks of an eye. So, I mean, it's not like
right.
your DNA line is just going to be eradicated that quickly. I mean, if we still have Neanderthal and Homo erectus inside of our DNA, why in 10,000 years would the DNA of a cave hyena just all of a sudden disappear?
Right. Right. If it's in some lineage, some line. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Now you got my brain thinking. I like it.
Well, hey, my friend, I mean, this is good, right? To try to keep it, two-way street. I'm glad I can teach you something too. This is great. And all right, so we're gonna head back over now to Castle Hauschka because this place, the more I read about it, the more I realize what the dirty stash and the SS were really up to. Man, there just becomes more and more clarity to this because recently also I was introduced to that the Dirty Stash literally was a madman in regards. Yes, he's already a madman, but he was so meticulous on keeping files and notes on everything. Okay. And he even openly admitted to disposing of files that he didn't want others to get a hold of, or he felt like he might be, or his inner circle, the only people that really needed to know about it, etc. So it makes you wonder, as the war was closing out, how much stuff did he potentially burn? Because in these files, he's spoken about a lot of interesting things. Okay. And this doesn't directly tie into what I'm going to say next, but it's super interesting where I don't remember the exact date, but in the Black Forest or the Black Woods over there in Germany, which is a very interesting area that the SS and all those guys were infatuated with. Okay, there was a UFO crash supposedly that they were able to take it because it wasn't damaged that much and basically
Mm.
fix it enough where they were able to start re-engineering aspects of this and understanding how it worked. And there is documentation that the SS and the Dirty Stash had some sort of strange craft they were working with that was circular and
Yeah.
it had propulsion up and down, but that was about it. So they were trying to figure out some stuff with it, but they also, this is
Yeah.
documented again. People can look this up. They had little mercury balls. Yes, the Dirty Stash and them were able to manifest these mercury balls that they could release, and they would sit there and cling to the United States like airplanes and such and cut your power off immediately. Okay. And they have been found on numerous sunken SS ships and also in other areas where there were these mercury balls that literally were used for this. How much he got to
Hmm.
use those for, who knows? That technology he was able to somewhat get from messing around with that UFO. So we just know in general this dude was a madman, but extremely smart, was in all these occult areas, all these extraterrestrial areas, doing human experimentation. So this leads us back now over to Castle Hauschka, because I learned that, well, Heinrich Himmler loved this place. He didn't just go there
Hmm.
once, he was there as much as possible, which I didn't realize. And
Right.
recently, yeah, they found a group of strange soldiers in bizarre uniforms
Oh yeah,
that
I
were
remember this.
buried all around Castle Hauschka. Not saying these are cryptids or anything, but their uniforms and some of their bones didn't really look right to these people that have found it, and they're still looking into it. But it does kind of tie into this program that they can see he did have called the Berserkers. This was a program that the SS and the Dirty Stash were working on, where they were no different, potentially like the Viking Berserkers, just insane people or whatever they were trying to do that could not really feel damage and all this. So, okay, that doesn't prove, necessarily a cult, but that does, murky the water a little bit more into these next things I'm going to tell you. So, they would also speak about what they would do is in this area, like you said, this pit of hell or whatever people would like to call it, it would reek of sulfur, and there is documented cases of when they would go in there, Heinrich Himmler and all them, and do these occult things, which, yes, we all know, like last time we talked about the 13,000 occult books they had. That's just so that we know of. They would go in there and do these seances, ceremonies, whatever they were doing, sacrificial stuff, and they would depict goat men and strange looking entities that look like werewolf type things coming up. They were always these beings that were humanish and animalish that would reek of sulfur. Okay, interesting, like
Hmm.
that, like the hellhounds and such, and
Right.
they would basically more or less be able to be potentially controlled. Who knows what they did to have the access to control those? But that again, okay, sure. I mean, it might seem a little far fetched, but it's documented. We weren't there though. But again, they're documenting that this is occurring. And now let's go way back, man, when this castle was first created. They didn't know what the heck was going on, all the locals, okay? So they decided they were going to take all these criminals, okay, and bring them up there and tell these people were going to be unalived anyhow. So they gave them a choice. You either go down to the bottom of this pit, you come back up, you have your freedom, or you can go over there and just get your head lopped off. Well, what do you think everybody did? I'm going to the pit, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first dude they sent down was a guy in his 20s, they said, okay, a young dude that was a unaliver and all this stuff, and they sent him down. He didn't even make it halfway down before everyone up there started hearing him screaming and all this. It's documented that when they pulled him back up, this is not the SS and stuff. This is again way
Yeah,
back.
this is back in the Middle Ages. Yeah.
Yes. And when they pulled him up, he was no longer a 20-year-old person. He was an elderly looking man that said what he saw and heard down there, that he would come up and be unalived any day over the torment and terrible things he saw down there. And that's again interesting because why did they document that? And
Hmm.
why did that occur? And fast forward, sure, if people want to say, well, yeah, the medieval times were a little gnarly, which they were. So let's fast forward. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, the Dirty Stash and all them were insane too, but they were very alert of their surroundings and what they were doing. And now they're documenting that. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I had actually read that part about the prisoner being lowered down into the castle myself just recently. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I looked into it more, and they when the castle was built, they had actually it wasn't just like, oh, we think they did this. Apparently, it's recorded that they built the defenses on the inside, right? So it was absolutely not a strategic location to control the land. Because the defenses were placed on the inside, and they actually had archers stationed there, and men at arms, whatever, medieval soldiers, and they had orders to shoot anything that came out of the hole, um, and that they were just, I don't know, until that castle closed down and was no longer used. That was what it was there for, to guard something, to keep it things out of the rest of the world. So that kind of, if we're talking about a hole that has some portal or access to some place normally we don't get to access, then you don't know what might come out of that, or where it's going to. So, yeah, to me that's the biggest giveaway, that it was a location different than any other castle and with a different purpose. Apparently, later on during the Renaissance, several hundred years later, they renovated it. So whoever was in control of it then wasn't worried about the hole, and they tore down the defenses on the inside, and in order to make it more of like a pleasant palace rather than a castle, and redid the outside. So yeah, it's fascinating that it would have been such an important position when it was first built. People would have forgotten why it was there. And then, the guys in the 1940s, when they took over that part of Czechoslovakia, um, were then recognized that it was a place that was special, right? Because, yeah, you're right. They did do a lot of, we don't know exactly what there, but experiments. Men were positioned there. It wasn't a strategic location. And experiments were rumored to have gone on there. The locals said that they thought the Germans were making super soldiers, or working on some sort of super soldier project, kind of like what you were talking about. So, what happened during like the 600 years in between, when I guess everyone forgot it was a portal to hell or something
Hmm.
supernatural? That's a good question.
Ooh, yeah, isn't that a good question, man? That's all just so baffling, but yet amazing and terrifying all in one, which is what is so appealing about learning about history sometimes, is because
Yeah,
it's cool to learn about stuff, but then you're like, dude, what the heck? Like,
yeah,
obviously some of the, I mean, any sort of torture is horrible, but some of the medieval ones, for example, I
yeah,
mean,
pretty brutal.
yeah, I'm gonna go back in, and I actually have something else I wanted to ask you about all this before we let you get rolling. But yeah, there was a king, I don't know what the heck he did, but they decided to take a horse prodder. We all know what a horse prodder does, and they, yeah, made it scalding hot, and they decided to shove it up this guy's anus. What the,
Nice.
like, how, who, like, what? Like, I mean, I understand, I guess, like, if societies and things feel like you need to rid yourself of somebody that's detrimental and things, okay, but who came up with that idea, man?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'd have to have been someone who had experienced horrible things throughout your life to even comprehend, to even come up with that idea, I'm sure. So that's yeah. I'm with you on that. Yeah, there are times where people need to be taken out of society, but that doesn't mean it needs to be some sort of freak show from Saw
Yes,
3 or
man.
something.
I mean, it's not funny, but it's just like, what the heck, dude? Like,
Yeah.
wow, man. And we all know, like, some of the ancient ways they did stuff. Like, yeah,
Oh yeah,
those
they
people are
they
pretty
had
freaked up.
horrible ways to execute people. And basically up until we started just hanging them. Just yeah, you learn about what the Egyptians would do, what the
Oh, bro.
Romans would
Oh,
do.
man.
Crucifixion. With the Romans, that was a way that they of people symbolically. That doesn't sound fun. Hang up there on a cross for multiple days until your body shuts down. That's terrible.
Yes, right. I mean, I would say though, even as terrible as that sounds, I think I might have rather taken that than being tied up to two horses and ripped apart, bro.
Yeah, it's that's a hard choice.
Yeah.
That is a
It's not
but
funny, but it's morbid, man. But basically, to tie and wrap this kind of all up, what I wanted to ask you is because I'm a big person of science, man. And I'm not opposed to ever changing my opinions about things, dude, at all. If people can present me stuff that is quality, man, and sways my interest, and there's actual evidence and things, it doesn't have to be meaning, when I say evidence, okay, how do judicial systems work? Do you just go in there, man, and claim if you and I are going up in a court and I just go in there with all this words and nothing else to show for it, but yet you have backing of everything you're talking about, who's going to win? You, because that's how things work, man. If I crash my car or somebody rear ends my car and I call my insurance company, well, yeah, the back of your car's rear ended. This person's sitting here with the front of their car messed up. You have pictures. That's all I'm saying. So, I'm very scientific based in regards of that, man. That's all, dude. And we can talk about this more next time, but witnesses are not quality. Okay. I have a whole
yeah,
entire study I've done on that of just why witnesses just don't necessarily mean the most quality. So for me to
right.
just ever take somebody at face value, it's not my swag, man. I just know growing up, I've taken people at face value and I've been burned, and then now I understand how people work. It's just not the way science works. So the reason I stated all that is, all right, you have the case of the SS chasing that female werewolf that Jody was able to debunk the video of itself, but there's actual documentation that that video is recreated to kind of show the dirty stash what had happened because he was so pissed off that they didn't
Hmm,
actually take the corpse. So you have that case. You have the World War I case where he and his scientists supposedly removed the head of a wolf and put it on the body of a crazy soldier that just wanted to go, go, go and dispose of all the British. That's documented. Okay. We have Celurexus Nathus. Okay. That place where they found the town hall where all the people had animal heads down there and such and body parts everywhere. That's documented. Okay, now we have the bodies found around Castle Hauschka, which are documented that look strange. We have the SS files actually admitting that they're doing human experimentations and such. And just recently, another one of their top people in his, I don't know, house or wherever he decided to chill and do these things, there were a ton more bodies with body parts missing of all different ages underneath there. Sure, he could have just been a serial liver, but is it
sure.
ironic that he was Heinrich Himmler's right-hand man doing this stuff? I don't know, man. So, do you classify all that as pretty quality evidence that we should definitely be looking into this? Because I mean, I think it is.
I mean, evidence. mm, I I wouldn't necessarily call it that, but I think that there's enough smoke there to go and see if there's fire. Um, it, like you said, that basically witnesses, um, and all of that evidence is based on witnesses, right? I'm not discounting them. I'm very interested in it, but witnesses can get things wrong, especially if maybe you're working for some psychopath that doesn't like to hear bad news, or whatever. You might adapt your reports to give them what might keep you alive the longest. So, but I do think that there's a lot of interesting accounts there, and I, for one, I don't necessarily. I'm like you. I don't believe everything I hear, but when you hear the same thing from several different places, I think you can take a chance and give it some faith.
That's beautiful stuff right there. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Like you just said, I mean, all the indigenous stuff I hear. That's just what I
Yeah.
mean about actual stuff, just to like back it up. Okay. It's not just like I'm hearing it from one person. I'm hearing it for centuries. I'm seeing it from different individuals and different points of view and stuff. And that's just what I mean about actually having structure and something to stand on for a little bit, which is a
Yeah.
big reason, I got into the Dogman thing because I found it fascinating, but I also realized there were ancestors that really do fit into the classification, like the amphicenoidoids and the amphicenoidae and just all kinds of things that fall into line with science and stuff. And I just find it fascinating. So I always do appreciate
Hmm.
individuals like you and others that are willing to like think outside of the box and stuff, man. And before we let you get back to what you're doing, do you have anything else you'd like to touch base on? Or
Um, I do find it interesting that for like 20 American dollars, you can nowadays just go take a tour of Castle Huska. So the current powers that be don't see any threat there or anything of interest. And I don't know if that's comforting or concerning. So that's my thought on, that I wanted to add about the whole thing.
actually, that now that you say that, that is really interesting that you can just go there and chill. So that either means whoever is in control of it doesn't buy into that whatsoever,
But yeah.
or the calm before the storm again. I don't know, man. That is
Yeah,
pretty.
is it like the clown entity in Stephen King's It, where it comes back every 30 years or whatever the time frame was? Yeah.
That is straight up so disturbing. And yeah, as we tie this up too, this is something else I'd like to talk to you about. I think really just be aware out there. And I know through more modern day times, people think their encounters with Sasquatch and such are more docile. But again, if you look at the indigenous depictions of that and the early 1900 depictions of encounters with Sasquatch and such, they're not good encounters. And there is a lot of evidence supporting that they would feed upon women and
Hmm.
children as well. And now with like the Dogman and such, same thing. I mean, even ranging back to the Cynocephali, they weren't considered necessarily a race that you just want to go up and like chill with by yourself. I mean, they would consume the fallen soldiers on the field, and they were considered a warrior-based culture that was very stoic, meaning they didn't necessarily choose their alignment. They did what it is that they felt, more or less, okay? So they weren't necessarily good or evil, okay? They were in regards of how humans, I guess, would judge something. So just be careful out there to everybody. And
For
like
sure.
yeah, and like I said to you, I think they're more involved than we actually think they are, meaning Sasquatch. I think a lot of people are cutting a break on that. But I mean, if Dogman and Bigfoot are real, they're both pretty guilty parties, I think, in the missing
Yeah.
people.
Well, even if it's the best case scenario and they're, not necessarily man eaters, um, they're still wild animals. And, just like you shouldn't go up and try to touch a white-tailed deer, which is, not predatory and not, bigger than you are, because it may freak out and misinterpret your action as a threat and, defend itself. So even if Bigfoot and Dogman are like totally chill about not deliberately, we have to imagine they're still wild and unpredictable. So just like you wouldn't approach a black bear, you shouldn't probably approach the Dogman or the Bigfoot. That's my thoughts.
Ooh, you legends, you. Thank you for making it this far in the video. And if you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share it. Help get the truth out to the algorithm. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel.